Assalamu alaikum and greetings of peace, and of course shalom alaikum to our listeners out there. This is YUSUF ISMAIL from the South African Debate Initiative, and also if you are listening, if you're in the United Kingdom and you're listening via the Coventry Faith Foundation of my good brother Muhammad, who's not on today, but I will be doing the intros, and he's certainly in the background. And to our South African guests, guests from the United Kingdom, and of course other parts of the world who regularly tune into these podcasts and live streams. Today we've got an interesting, exciting show. We are joined by none other than Brother Imam Muhammad Al-ASI from Washington, D.C., all the way from Washington. The last time we did have him, we had him, I think he was in Granada in Spain a couple of months back. He's the research fellow at the Institute of Contemporary Islamic Thought. He's currently working, I would say a significant work in progress. He's finished about 11 volumes of the first ever English tafsir of the Quran, titled The Ascendant Quran, Realigning Man to the Divine Power Culture. About 11 or 12 volumes have since been published. It's not even a completed set, and it's a voluminous work. This has been his most recent work, The Ascendant Quran, an advanced English translation of the meanings of the Quran. Phenomenal work. What makes it even more phenomenal is the fact that, unlike a lot of the commentaries out there, some modern, some classical, is that a lot of them lack the contemporaneous element. And I think that is unique in the sense that it is radical, it is, if I could use a word, hardcore, hard-hitting, and goes to the root of the issue. And we've got none other. So without any further ado, I wish to welcome our good Imam all the way from Washington, D.C. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for having me on.
So you were in South Africa a few months ago. Again, we've never met. We never got to meet each other. I see we're meeting each other online. And, just like the pen pal doesn't get to meet. But inshallah, we would at some point in the future. Well, I just want to address one thing before we go into the topic. There was an unnecessary. I mean, we've got right now. We've spoken on this program about genocide. We've spoken about. We've looked at a lot of these international legal instruments, like the application brought by the South African government over the past several months. The reports by Francesca Albanese, who's the special rapporteur. We've looked at some of the massacres that are taking place as we speak in the eye. And despite all of this, you've got a lot of local Muslims engaging in unnecessary attacks against each other. And so, unfortunately, we had a character, an individual by the name of Bilal Mullah. I don't know if he's a Zionist. I don't know if he's a supporter of the state of Israel. But he launched, when you were in South Africa a couple of months ago, he launched an unnecessary attack on this Quran translation, this Quran. And what I did is I invited him this particular evening. And I invited him a couple of weeks back to tell him about this oncoming program. And he gave a response by suggesting that he would like to meet, like to engage, sending the StreamYard link. So we're here for the next hour or so. If he wants to come in, he can come in. But unfortunately, he's not here right now. We want to make this as diverse as possible. We have lots of listeners viewing in at some point. If you want to come in and question the Sheikh, you're more than welcome to do so. But the discussion for this evening is the invention of the state of Israel and the Jewish identity of racism. So let me start off with this, Imam. In your Quranic translation, many times when you discuss the Bani Israel, you tie it up, and I've seen the commentaries, your first and second volumes, you tie it up particularly to what is happening contemporaneously within the state of Israel. You've mentioned the Jewish lobby, AIPAC, and so on. My question to you at the outset, how do you establish the nexus between the fallings of the Bani Israel and as identified in the Quran and what you see contemporaneously in the world by people who call themselves Jews but may possibly have alignment to atheistic ideologies? To start off with that at the outset.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa man walah. Okay, I think as this is before I begin anything, I want to put up front here that we are about, even though the time frame is quite limited, but we are about to enter a minefield of ideas in which there are many
We
casualties.
seem to have lost you, Imam. Your sound has gone off for some reason. If Brother Muhammad could just assist with your sound, has your sound gone off?
I
If you
can
could
hear.
unmute yourself. So, can Muhammad, Brother Imam, could you speak? Because I lost your sound.
Yes, I can hear you very well. Can you hear me?
I can't seem to hear you for some reason. I think there may be a problem from my side, but I can't seem to hear you at all. I can't hear the Imam at all, Brother Muhammad. There's supposed to be an issue. Is there an issue there? I can't hear the Imam. And I'm unmuted, so if possibly you could unmute both of us, but I can't seem to hear the Imam.
I can hear everything.
I don't know if there's a gremlin here for some reason. We've never had this particular problem. Plug headphones. This is bizarre. I've never had this problem at all. My mic is muted. I'm going to try. What do I say here? There seems to be something which is a problem in relation to this. I may possibly let you continue until, of course, I get the particular issue. And of course, we'll then play it out from that particular perspective. But there seems to be some sort of gremlin in the chat. So what I would suggest, Imam, if you could then possibly continue from your side. For some reason, the sound has just disappeared from my side. If you can continue from your side, that'll be fine. I'll try and get myself a headphone or a headset to probably enable me to hear myself better. So you can continue, Imam.
Okay. So as I was saying, we are about here to enter a minefield of ideas in which there are many, many mental casualties. The reason for that is history has been polluted, and contemporary information has been rigged. And so people really don't understand the depth of what is going on because it has a historical root and it's playing out nowadays. So I want to also mention that even in the Islamic literature, and I'm talking about books of tafsir, books of fiqh, and books of history, there have been what is called Isra'iliyat. And that is information that came from those who used to belong to the Jewish faith and became Muslims. And so they introduced into the general Islamic literature information that was in their Jewish background. And some of this information may be valid, but some of it is definitely not valid. And so the reference in this presentation obviously is going to be the one and only book from Allah that has been preserved exactly the way it was revealed when it was revealed over 1400 years ago. So to go back to this issue of Bani Israel, the children of Israel, it's a racist appropriation of religion. In other words, racism has injected itself into the Jewish faith, whereby the understanding of certain Jewish higher ups, their understanding of their religion is to think of other people as lesser human beings. This is at the level of belief and conviction. We're not in the area right now of politics and military decisions. We are strictly in the area of what those who belong to the Jewish faith, not all of them, but some of them who belong to, and these some of them are the most influential, who belong to the Jewish faith, who really and truly believe and are convinced that they are superior to all other peoples in the world, or as some of them may say, to all other races of the world. So you can begin to understand when you grow up, you go to school, you go to the yeshiva, or you go to a type of Jewish school, and from those early years in life, you are indoctrinated to believe and to act as a human being who is above the rest of humanity, and the rest of humanity are low lives. So if we want to trace this, we can go back to the Quranic information about Bani Israel. May I here, as a matter of background information, add that there are hundreds and hundreds of verses in the Quran, if not thousands. In one way or the other, they relate to the history of Bani Israel, because Banu Israel, children, descendants of Israel, they had probably the lion's share of receiving revelation from on high. And because that is the case, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not want the final recipients of divine scripture. He didn't want them to repeat the mistakes, the historical mistakes, the systematic mistakes, and the deviational mistakes of Bani Israel. And that's why we have a plethora of ayat in the Quran that shed light on this particular mentality. Thus, this particular group of people who act with disrespect to the rest of the human family. And all of this began, and it's important for us, extremely important for us, to understand that this was not always the case with Bani Israel. Or this was not always the case with the Jewish faith, because the chapter of Bani Israel begins with the sons of Prophet Yaqub, Jacob, who is known in Israeli literature more so as Israel rather than Jacob. So how did all of this, where did all of this psychological mess begin? And I remember giving a presentation at one of the synagogues, and I never was invited after that to any synagogue, but I gave a presentation at one of the synagogues, a major one here in the Washington, D.C. area, and this must have been about 40 years ago, in which I brought to the attention, and most of those, there were hundreds of Jewish attendees and just dozens of Muslim attendees, in which I brought this whole issue to the fore of that congregation and the rabbi. was a very nice, courteous gentleman, I must say. He passed away some years ago, of the liberal type of Judaism. I brought to their attention the genesis of the differences that describe the position of Muslims vis-a-vis the Jews in general. And this is also something I think the listeners or viewers should be aware of, and that is that the narrative of Prophet Yusuf, Joseph. By the way, the rabbi, his name was Yusuf or Joseph. The history of Prophet Yusuf is only mentioned to the Jews and to the Muslims. The New Testament has no knowledge, has no information about Yusuf. But the whole issue, the psychological genesis of the warfare that we are witnessing today can be traced all the way back to that generation, to that family, actually. And the history of Judaism before that, which is Isaac and Abraham, the prophets of Allah, it didn't have this stain to it. I mean, the stain of racism and discrimination and prejudice and bias. It did not exist. But here is where it all begins. It begins in the family of Prophet Yaqub, Jacob, or Israel, as some would prefer to call him.
So Imam, I just want to, I know, sorry, I apologize for the gremlin was on my side, not on your side, so I had a problem with my sound, but you back and clear. So what I want to understand in line, and I kind of got the latter part, quite a significant part of what you stated. The question that is then put is that, you know, you've traced this kind of historical trajectory. My point is that the far right, for example, today want to then, in light of what you presented, portray the existing conflict as a kind of conflict between a purist form of Judaism vis-a-vis a purist form of Islam or Islamism. But in actual fact, the issue that I want to establish is that, do we have a situation where, for example, you're having a selective group of individuals or an ideology that is appropriating certain aspects of the Jewish religion and then, of course, finding it manifest writ large in the Middle East? Or do you have what is happening in the Middle East part and parcel of that Judeo-Christian memory, which can indeed be traced to the Old Testament? And of course, when the Quran mentions the kind of fallings of the Bani Israel, because, you know, the problems I have is that anachronistic comparisons sometimes do a disservice to the reality of what's happening. And by a lot of people, particularly the far right and those in the Trump administration, they are presenting this as a kind of a battle. I mean, I've seen, what's her name, Tulsi Gabbard, and a lot of these individuals that are now appointed, presenting this within the mainstream media as reflective of an inherent clash of religions and religious ideologies as opposed to a political conflict. What would you say to that?
Well, actually, your question had a lot of terminology that has to be filtered. When we say the far right, that's a very broad description. That far right has in it those who can see issues quite clearly, and they are not the majority, of course, but they belong to the far right. And those who, and these are the ones right now who are in positions of power and going to be making some very dangerous decisions. Those are the ones that some call them neoconservatives, others call them evangelical Christians, others call them the Jewish lobby or the Zionist lobby in the United States. And they have their influences all around the military industrial complexes in the world, practically. So in this nexus of decision makers and politicians and officials, and leading the charge right now, I think everyone knows this, leading the charge is going to be this new Trump administration. And he has brought together very combustible elements. I don't know whether this type of selection of prime decision makers is going to be able to function in a normal way, because the person at the Pentagon and the person who's head of national security and a couple of other individuals, they are very hardcore, fanatical, anti-Islamic, anti-Palestinian, anti-human rights personalities that you can find on planet Earth. On the other hand, you have people who don't want a war. You mentioned Tulsi Gabbard. She's one of them. She doesn't favor this American cowboy foreign policy all around the world. Shoot first and ask questions later.
She's been very vocal in support of the state of Israel, Indian fascism, Russia for that particular matter. I found her leaning to that aspect. I mean, although she's wanting to call the end of the war.
Well, no, if I understand her correctly, well, let me tell you something. This is just, for you to know. There was several years ago, must have been about 8 years or so ago, some students in the state of Washington, in Seattle, Washington, here in the United States, not Washington, D.C., Seattle, Washington on the West Coast, they put together a program and they invited me to go and speak. I can't remember the theme of that program. But because I attended so many conferences and speaking engagements, etc., I think this was in the aftermath of some type of execution in Saudi Arabia. And there was a severance of diplomatic relations between Saudi Arabia and Islamic Iran. And so I was invited, and before contacting me, these organizers in Seattle, they contacted Tulsi Gabbard, and she agreed to come to give some type of thoughts about what's happening there in the Muslim East. And then several days before the event, she had touched base with the organizers and asked who else is going to be participating in the program. And they mentioned to her my name. And then immediately she said, well, you can exclude me from your program. She has a very interesting and checkered background. I don't know if you know this, but she used to be a Democrat, and then she turned, and then began supporting Trump, as others did. But she was a very a vocal person in that regard. And in the past, I don't know, 2 or 3 years or so, she was classified officially by the FBI and Homeland Security. Each had their own terminology, but one of them, I can't remember, was FBI or Homeland Security, classified her, listen to this, as an informational terrorist.
Wow.
And so she was stopped at airports, and she was followed on the plane by 2 security personnel, and she was just targeted by the establishment. So this is, I don't want to get sidetracked here, but this is the type of selection of individuals that Trump is putting together. RFK also is not enthusiastic about any types of wars out there in the world, that means. And so are some others. But there are others who are gung-ho. They can't wait to pull the trigger. and to drop the bomb. They just can't wait. And so how this is going to play out, Allahu Alam, Allah knows best. So anyways, going back to the original question of this sort of alliance of convenience between what you may call the pro-Zionist American segments of the political population. Most of them are evangelicals, by the way, even though a very few evangelical types are strictly and strongly against them. So this is internally, this is a schism among the evangelicals. Unfortunately for us and for humanity, the wrong people are leading the charge, and the right people don't have much clout in all of this. Along with, of course, the gorilla on Capitol Hill, and that's the AIPAC, the Jewish lobby in the United States, and among themselves, if you were to sit down in a cozy exchange of ideas with someone belonging to the Jewish lobby and someone belonging to the evangelicals, if they were to divulge their deepest secrets, they hate each other. There's no love between them. And their eschatological view of the world is of Armageddon proportions, in which, you know, there's going to be an annihilation of the Jews, basically, because either they die or they believe in Christ, the same way the Christians believe in Christ. So, but what brings them together is their hostility and animosity towards the Muslims. Our weakness is their strength. Our division is their unity. This is the way it's been playing out. And that is why right now, of course, things are still in motion. We haven't reached anywhere near the end of where all of this these types of policies are going, whether it's in Gaza, whether it's in the West Bank, whether it's in South Lebanon, etc., etc. Now, right now, there's a flare-up in northern Syria. Yeah, in which they are saying that, I mean, they, meaning the corporate media, is saying that Turkey and Israel and the United States now have sensed a weakness on part of Hezbollah and Iran and Iraq, which is what they call the axis of resistance. They've sensed some type of weakness, so now they are trying to exploit that to their own advantage. And we don't know how that's, I mean, this could be more dangerous than the past year and a couple of months that we've seen in Gaza and in southern Lebanon. This could be extremely dangerous because the Russians now are involved in bombing operations, and the Iraqi army or armed forces, etc., are more or less lining up to get involved in a Syrian war theater. And so we don't know how this is going to pan out. But what we do know is that the Israelis are definitely trying to get the United States involved in a war. This has been an obsession of Benjamin Netanyahu ever since the 1990s. He has a fetish for the United States to go to war against the Islamic Republic in Iran. That's been his goal. That's been his strategy. He's been working on it for all of these years. And according to some, he may recruit in one way or the other Trump to get involved in that type of military exchange between these two countries, and that would spell a disaster for everyone. It may even, the consequences and reverberations may reach southern Africa and
different parts of Africa. I mean, I guess that takes me to the next step. I mean, in light of the of this talk about Iran. I mean, he's been speaking about it even at Congress when they essentially engaged in idol worship. I saw literal idol worship, the adulation that they gave towards Netanyahu more than any other president. But I think this goes then to the original question, because which we get asked all the time, in the sense that, you know, in order to garner greater support for the Palestinian resistance and the Palestinian cause, the question still is inevitably, is this a political conflict whereby some parties appropriate religious terminology for their own benefit, or is this just simply a political conflict of a land which is then hijacked by the religious elements within the various world traditions, or is it a combination of both? Because at a fundamental level, I mean, when we talk about international legal instruments like the ICJ and the reports by the UN special rapporteurs and so on, they essentially present the entire aspect as, you know, something which is inherently political, but grounded in fundamental human rights violations by the state of Israel for whatever its purpose. So as a Muslim, my question to you, Imam, is how should Muslims present this? Because you've got some Muslims that want to present this as a kind of a clash of civilization between Jews and Muslims, or Judaism and Islam. And then you've got others that have a far more nuanced approach. What would your approach be in conveying the realities of what is happening in Gaza to the wider world? Should it be presented as a kind of a war on Islam, between Judaism and Islam, or something which is far more, you know, complex and nuanced in its approach, which doesn't necessarily have elements of religion per se inside the conflict?
Well, to answer your question, the issue has nothing to do, as is presented in the mainstream media, that this is, to begin with, a clash between Palestinians and Israelis that has taken on a range of a brewing war between Muslims and Jews, in which the Christians are on the side of the Jews. That's the way they want us to think, in this bifurcated manner. But it's a simple way of understanding it. The key word that most of the times, if not all the times, the key word that is absent from this conflict is social justice. That's the key word that has to be interjected into analyzing what is happening there. Now, there are people on the side of the Jews who want, obviously, because they stole a country, they stole a land, and I don't know if I made this comment on your program or another program, but the fact of the matter is that these Zionists who stole Palestine, before that they stole a race, and that is the Semitic race. They're not Semites. And then they stole the religion. Zionism is not Judaism. So they want us to get involved in the tail aspect of this whole issue, that this is a clash over lands. There are two peoples claiming the same piece of land. That's where they want us to be. But they don't want us to look at this in the broader range in which we can identify, number one, you Zionists who are saying that you are of the Jewish faith. We ask you candidly, is there anything in your understanding of Judaism that violates the principle that you say you hold dear, and that is justice? Is there anything in your understanding, in your interpretation, and in your implementation of the Torah, of the teachings of Moses, of the scripture from on high, that justifies what you are doing? because we are looking at the issue of justice and social justice. And we want to hold you to those standards of justice and social justice, which we, by the way, share. Now, when we come to the Islamic side, because of the initial comments that I made, there's a lot of information in the Islamic library, let's say, and thus in the Islamic public mind, there's a lot of information that also excludes the issue of justice and social justice. And so doing that, Muslims are led to believe that this is a war between one people and another people over a piece of land. And that is not the case. We are not fighting over, even though, the fight for the return of the Palestinians to their homes and to their homelands is part of the issue. There's no doubt about that. But that is not the origin of the issue. It is not the development of the issue, and it is not the future of the issue. The whole issue is an issue of social justice. Can anyone belonging, go back to the Muslims. When Muslims omit this, and this is part of the Quran, لقد أرسلنا رسلنا بالبينات وأنزلنا معهم الكتاب والميزان ليقوم الناس بالقسط. We indeed have sent our messengers, our prophets, our apostles with clear instructions, and we have revealed to them scripture so that people, didn't say Muslims, didn't say Jews, generic people all over the world honor social justice. That's the crux of the issue. When we put this up front and we say, explain to me what you are doing in terms of social justice, obviously the Jewish or Zionist argument is going to fall flat. They can't. But when you even give it to a rudimentary Muslim, it doesn't have to be a scholar, doesn't have to be, this fight is going on for our rights. We want to obtain our rights. Who can disagree with that? Whatever faith, whatever ideology, whatever background a person may have, who can argue against having justice done on earth as it is in heaven? Who can do that? But they get away with this back and forth because they omit this whole thing. If we were to hold them accountable, say, look, you of the Jewish faith and we of the Muslim faith, we honor the standards of justice like no others. Explain to us. You see, that's why you don't see, with all of this going on, has anyone seen a live debate between rabbis and imams? And you can
you don't see it.
You don't see it because they're arguing. If of course you can bring some type of Johnny come lately imam, or some Uncle Tom imam, or some Quisling. You can bring someone like that. Even, and then, you can, rabbis are more informed, unfortunately, than most of our contemporary religious Islamic leaders. And they can present an argument to the public in which the representative of the Islamic faith, he doesn't have a case, or he'll try. And this is what's happening. We've come to an age where we are seeing and witnessing Zionist Muslims. I mean, there's a contradiction.
Yeah, a lot of them.
Yeah,
I mean, we've had them regularly on this program. Just on Saturday, I sent you. This is a new kind of a phenomenon, and I mean, it just takes me back to the important point you made: is that our religious leaders are not engaging in the debate. I mean, on online, in the public sphere, at universities, at campuses. It's an entirely different generation. You've got your Mahdi Hassans and various other individuals. A lot of them are secular, by the way. They don't come with that Quranically informed background, which couches the discourse, as you stated, in the parameter or aligning it with social justice. So they've got their own baggages, and this is just the unfortunate aspect. And it appears to be that from the Jewish religious side, at least those who are Zionists, seem to be articulating a more powerful case from their perspective than the Muslim religious leadership side. This is just the unfortunate reality of the thing, and that's why it's platforms like this, and Brother Muhammad, myself, many other platforms. But we are not religious leaders per se. We're not imams or scholars as such. But we're attempting to take a space which should be there by our imams, by our religious leaders, by our scholars, and that's just not happening, unfortunately.
That is correct. And the reason for that is because these, let's call them religious scholars. We have to agree to some type of terminology.
Yeah.
These religious scholars are schooled. They go to universities in Saudi Arabia, or they go to universities in some other Islamic countries. Whatever you want to call it. And they are schooled in such a way that they cannot understand the holistic meanings of the Quran. They are reductionists. They will, and you just have to listen to some of their khutbahs. They will ascend the minbar on Friday, and then they will quote maybe an ayah, and then they'll quote 10 hadiths. Instead of them quoting 10 ayat and one hadith, because the hadith is to enlighten or to expand or to fertilize or to enrich the meanings of these ayat, they do it the other way around. And the body of hadith, I've been saying this on every occasion available to me, the hadith literature that we have has to be filtered. I cannot overemphasize this fact. The hadith literature that we have, some hadiths are valid, genuine, and authentic. No doubt about that. But some other hadiths are invalid, they are forged, they are fake, and they are fabricated. And we have to get rid, one way or the other. I mean, it's going to take a major effort, and we need qualified ulama to sit together and weed the fabricated hadiths out of the original and the authentic hadiths. This has to be done, because part of the problem that this clergy class, let me call it that, belonging to the Muslims, many of them, by the way, I don't want to knock them down, many of them are very sincere, except that sincerity has been victimized by the lack of kinetic knowledge that we need. We don't need, we don't need individuals to go to memorize things. We now have electronics that can memorize things much better than individuals. What we need is an understanding that is translated into action. And what I mean by action, I mean economic action, I mean financial action, political action, military action, all of that. Or else the Quran is a dead book. If the Quran does not motivate us to the levels that we are expected to reach, then not only is the Quran a dead book, the Quran cannot be a dead book by itself, but it could be described as such if its followers are lifeless. And that's where we are.
To the message itself.
Yeah.
So there's no. If I could put it and summarize it, is that you're saying that the believer has to have agency. There has to be a consistent interpretative relationship with the text of the Quran. Would that be then your assessment of what should happen?
Well, what should happen is an understanding of Islam as a civilization, not the understanding of Islam in the bathroom and in the bedroom and in the genitalia part of the human physique, That's not Islam. Islam is the world out there. It's civilization in the healthiest meaning of the word. That's what Islam is. And
If I can ask you this, Imam, I don't want to take us off the topic, but just the issue is that we understand that Islam has always had a high standard of personal hygiene, whether it's bathroom, bedroom, and so on and so forth, as you mentioned. All of that is part and parcel of the fiqh, which developed, of course, the jurisprudence. But my question is, that's what we taught as children. That's what we taught as kids growing up. I mean, my question is, why is there then in today's society, and I see it now, I come from a community and a background where the vast majority are ideologically Deobandi in South Africa, either the Deobandi or the Bareilly school of that comes from the Indo-Pakistani subcontinent. Brother Muhammad will probably tell me that something similar happens in the UK. Obviously, there's a shift that's happening. But why is there the inherent obsession, like a kind of a fetish, to obsessively focus on this, even in the public discourse? Is there something at work at some point in time in the 20th century where conspiratorially the focus was on that personal hygiene, which is something which is ingrained as a child? I was taught as a child how to wash myself in the toilet. I was taught as a child, a 3 or 4-year-old, my 4-year-old knows how to do it. The point is, why is there the emphasis on that and leaving out the civilizational context and the kind of holistic global worldview which Islam really is?
well, I think it boils down to, number one, it is convenient, it's easier, it's non-demanding to reduce Islam from its civilizational horizon to the confines of this, the fiqhi issues, the type of personal
Maslas and personal cleanliness and that kind of issues. Yeah,
that only have to do with our bodies as individuals and as family. But when these scholars, and when they explain Islam in this within this circumference, it doesn't demand from them to do anything. What are you going to expect them to do? Just to go on the minbar on Friday, or to give some type of halaqah or religious lesson during the evening at 1 day a week or whatever like that? It's very easy. The other very important thing to remember here is that there's money in doing this. If you don't raise the bar of Islam, if you don't take the meanings of Islam into the struggle, the real struggle in life to bring about social justice, if you don't do that, we are willing to build you a masjid. We are willing to secure for you a monthly salary. We are willing to accept some of your murids or some of your students or some of your relatives into our universities, give them scholarships and all of this. So when you compare whether you're going to go with the easy way of communicating what you've reduced Islam into, or whether you're going to go the divine way in which you are going to follow Allah's orders and the teachings of his prophet, then I think for most people, it becomes very easy to choose. Of course,
I don't want to attack anyone, but is that probably also one of the reasons why, for example, the Jamaat-e-Tabligh, I mean, they openly allowed, without any questioning, in the United States, I don't know, hypothetically in Jerusalem, I had a friend of mine who was part of the Jamaat. They go to Jerusalem, but they're not questioned. It's a kind of an open borders policy with them. Is it because of the fact that it is more focused and Western world is happy and contented with a kind of quietism, this so-called Muslim quietism, which just focuses on internal religious pieties as opposed to making real meaningful change in the world around them? And that's why they can tolerate that, so long as you can have your beautiful masajids and you do your prayers, you do what they view your worship, they call it your prayers, but you don't have a meaningful change in society, then that's fine. They're happy with that. And I think that seems to be the order of the day. I mean, in apartheid South Africa, you had a lot of these key bodies like the Judicial Council, the Jamiat al-Ulama of South Africa, and so on. They were quiet. And I saw some of the old magazines to speak out against apartheid South Africa. It was people like Imam Abdullah Haroon, who was rejected by the general class of the clergy, and Imam Ahmed Kasim, many of these anti-apartheid struggle stalwarts who were, genuine Islamic scholars in their own right, but they were rejected by the majority. And today you see the same thing, is that the same class wants to be aligned with the political establishment. There's a fear, there's an inherent fear of critique, and I think it's probably a question of a comfort that appears to be maintained, and this relationship that is far more easier for them to maintain, as opposed to one which puts them directly in terms of challenging. I mean, I'll tell you one thing, just as a side, while the International Court of Justice application by the South African, the legal team, there was one Muslim lady, but by and large, no major Muslim legal body came out in support of it. No major ulama body came out in support of the application. I mean, there was nothing there. And I mean, obviously, as us as individuals, and I've been speaking and supporting of it, but collectively, we haven't put ourselves behind it. And this is what's frustrating for a lot of us, and the youth that are basically being dislocated and disconnected from their particular ability to practice and implement Islam holistically.
You see, earlier we were speaking about the Palestinian issue, and I made the remark that social justice is absent from presenting this issue. What goes around comes around. When we speak internally about the Muslims and those who have their organizations and they have their jama'as and they have all of this, where's the issue of social justice there? Where is it? There's a whole body of ayat in the Quran that speak about nafaqa and infaq and sadaqa and zakah and all of these issues. What happened? Are these أَتُؤْمِنُونَ بِبَعْضِ الْكِتَابِ وَتَكْفُرُونَ بِبَعْضِ? Are you committing yourselves to parts of the scripture and then abandoning other parts of the scripture of the Quran?
Which is the allegation against Bani Israel as well.
Exactly. So when we think about it without the blinders that we have inherited, we will find that if we just erase, that veneer of Islam that certain individuals present to the public, which are the rituals and the ceremonies and all of this, if we just take that away, the real character of those who have Muslim names, their real character is an Israeli character. It's not an Islamic character. So in a sense, the clashes that have been going on for the past 70 plus years between those who were displaced from Palestine and those who took Palestine by force, that's been an internal Israeli clash. If we could just do away with the rituals on all sides, whether they are Jewish, Christian, or Muslim, do away with the rituals. Oh, someone goes to a church, someone goes to a synagogue, another person goes to a masjid. Okay, is that going to fool you? It will fool you if you don't have the social justice standard ingrained in your heart and in your mind. Then you're going to be fooled. And that's why we are visited by these types who, you mentioned that, the marhum, the two marhums, Imam Abdullah Haroon and Imam Qasim. These were rejected by the powers that be, and even by their own ritualistic types, because inside of them, they were not Israelis. They couldn't find common ground. And this happened to all Allah's messengers throughout history. Their societies did not sit comfortably with them. They were antagonized, they were isolated, they were exiled, they were all of this. Why? Because they understood their relationship with Allah, that it has to honor social justice in human life, regardless of the population, regardless of the rituals or religion, regardless of all of these other things. This is central. And because it's been marginalized, we wind up with the type of, let's call it, mess that we have today.
I see that there's a question in the group chat, and I think that if I could just read it out, you can probably see it. Can you argue Judaism, and I assume they mean the Jew, the idea of a Jew, is racial if they are black, white, Arabic, or Chinese Jews, which of course they are? How is it different than the faith community that grows out of Islam, uniting people and transcending nationalism? I think the question I want to know is that, which is obviously the case, that why is Jew always being presented, even in the mainstream media, as an ethnic racial class, whereas, you've got different types of Jews that transcend race? What would your take be on that?
Well, the definition of Judaism, there's a Zionist definition of Judaism, and there's a Jewish definition of Judaism. If you take the Zionist definition of Judaism, then you will have nominal Jews. I mean, on paper, they're considered to be Israelis. That's where Zionism is. That's where it rules. It rules in colonized Palestine. So on paper, if there's an Ethiopian Jew going to that land, and there's another Jew from India, and a fourth Jew from, let's say, Yemen, etc., you have all of them. So on paper, they're all considered to be Jews. But in real life, there's no such thing as equality among them. And this appears from time to time. You can remember years ago when there was a call went out from the hospitals in Tel Aviv and in Al-Quds and these other areas that they needed blood. So could people come and donate their blood? So some African Jews went, most of them Ethiopian, they went to donate blood, said, no, we're not going to take your blood. So what does that mean? What does that tell you? Have you ever seen a person who's in charge of those of that regime that controls the Holy Land? Has anyone seen a black person as president, or as prime minister, or as foreign minister, or any other type of minister? Has anyone seen any of them around? And you have to say that the Zionists are very smart and clever. They would pre-think that, public opinion is going to wake up and realize, wait a minute here, we have to present ourselves as being equal, at least as Jews. So we could put a black president, a Jewish president who is black, so that at least we take away that argument. A token person. They have not even done that to prove who they really are. See, this issue of racism, and that's another issue. How do you define who a Jew is?
Just one thing. There's a question in the link, but I just want to clarify one aspect for you. I know the hour's up, so
I have 5 more minutes.
You've got 5 more minutes. Okay, so I would like to make it half an hour more, but I'm sorry, I apologize. 5 more minutes. So just to clarify, when the Quran mentions, and this is the next question there, but I just want to focus on this issue since we don't move off. When the Quran mentions Bani Israel, right, and in light of the fact that there's terminologies like, for example, Muslim, which is used, as you've clearly, and people like Muhammad Asad, many other Islam scholars have identified as used generically, would we then be correct in saying that the Bani Israel who are mentioned in the Quran were actually Muslim, the Muslim followers of Musa alayhi salam, and that Jews, and I'm not talking about modern day Jews, but classical Jews, within the, prior to Christ, do not necessarily fall within that particular category of being described as Bani Israel?
Well, I gave a series of lectures, I think about 112 of them, to explain directly from the ayat of the Quran who Bani Israel are. Because in the Quran you have three terminologies. You have Bani Israel, you have Yahud, and you have Al-Asbat. And because we are living in a non-thinking generation of Muslim ulama, they lump all of them together. And so the consumer of information, you or me or any other, they think that, oh, all of these are the same. No, they are not the same. That we have to be very meticulous, very careful when we approach these words in the Quran. That's why at the beginning I tried to, and I don't know how, I'm not a person who's very tech savvy, and I can mention to you right now, right off the bat, how you can access these over 100 lectures or presentations about Bani Israel and about Yahud and all of this terminology in the Quran concerning them, so that we can have a clear idea. Because the first generation of Bani Israel was the family of Prophet Yaqub. They were the first generation, and their racism was their discrimination, which became racism, was a family affair. They wanted to kill their own brother. They are sons of a prophet, and they are brothers of a prophet, and they wanted to kill their own brother because of that destructive flame of an ego in the family. And all of this is outlined in Surah Yusuf. And from there on, it grew into this racial, or in some cases, racist understanding of Judaism. And that's where we find ourselves today, when it has climaxed with what the Israelis are doing to the Goyim, or the Gentile, or Al-Ummiyin. So this is what is happening today. We have to have a clear understanding. There's an ayah in the Quran. It says, يا أيها الذين آمنوا كونوا أنصار الله كما قال عيسى ابن مريم للحواريين من أنصاري إلى الله قال الحواريون نحن أنصار الله. Okay, Isa is speaking to his disciples, and he's saying, who of you are going to be the renewers of the faith with me? Some of them responded positively. They called Ansarullah. And then the ayah says, فَآمَنَتْ طَائِفَةٌ مِّن بَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ وَكَفَرَتْ طَائِفَةٌ. A faction of Bani Israel committed themselves along with Prophet Isa, and another faction denied and rejected Jesus. But if you tell some Muslims, some of Bani Israel could be mu'mineen, if Isa was to return right now, or Imam al-Mahdi was to come and present the truth to Bani Israel, we might find the same thing happening all over again. A faction of them will commit themselves, and a faction of them will reject the truth and justice. So this is what we have in the real world.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed. No, you know what? I've just also been notified by my co-host that we have to bring this to a wrap, and I do take into account that that your time's limited. I think we need to have a longer session in the future, probably on a day when you're more available, but hopefully before Christmas and before the New Year, where we can unpack these various aspects. I mean, because each particular topic goes into so many different facets and discussions, and it's always been a pleasure, and it's always intellectually and Islamically enriching to me, and I take it to all the guests and viewers out there who listen to you each time you communicate and articulate your powerful message. So I want to thank you for that. This is the Ascendant Quran, the fantastic translation being done by Imam Al-ASI. He's done a 4th-volume translation that's widely available in South Africa. There's an English only one which is available to give out to the universities, and it's academically attractive. So if you want to give it to your professors and your particular colleagues at university, that will be ideal to them. And until next time, I'm going to scratch my head here so I can notify my guest, my co-host in the United Kingdom, who cannot communicate now because he's engaged in another session. Till next time, Imam, we wish you the best, and we'll certainly get you. And we, for those out there who want to contact us, and you can email me at yusufismaillaw@gmail.com, or put your email and your contact details in our YouTube chat. You can extract this and use it and share it as widely as possible. Till then, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Fi amanillah, and you take care, Imam. All the best.
Assalamu wa rahmatullah. Fi amanillah.
Fi amanillah. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu wa rahmatullah.